Over there citing.
You can't make this one.
Your screen.
Okay. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this regular council meeting to order and begin by acknowledging with gratitude that we live and work on the traditional territory of this whole people have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding the Bowen Island. Welcome to the Bowen Island Municipality meeting of Monday, June 10th, 2024, and thank you for joining. For those of you here in the gallery or online, my name is Andrew Leonard. I'm the Mayor of Bowen Island Municipality and the chair of this meeting. I'd like to introduce the other elected members of Bowen Island's Council that are joining us here in person and online today. Starting on my far right, we have Councillor and Islands Trustee Sue Ellen Fast. To her left is Councillor and Islands Trustee Judy Getty. To my far left is Councillor Tim Wake. To his right is Councillor Allison Morse. And joining us online by Zoom today is Councillor Alex Jurgensen. We're also joined by members of our professional staff team here this afternoon, including our Chief Administrative Officer, Liam Edwards, and our Corporate Officer, Sophia Singa, and other staff who may be presenting agenda items here this afternoon. This meeting is being recorded, and when members of the public speak during the public comment and question and answer period of the meeting, your presence and voice will be included in the permanent recording, which will be available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca, as well as our YouTube channel where it's live streaming now. This council meeting is an official forum for the conducting of the business of local government. We all love our home. We are all passionate about what happens in this community. I'd encourage everyone to maintain a constructive and respectful tone during the meeting and to direct comments for council during the public comment or question and answer period of the meeting to myself. For those that are following along, the agenda and full council package for this afternoon's meeting is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca. And with that, I will look to the corporate officer for the addition of any late items this afternoon.
There are no late items today.
Okay, with no late items, I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda for the June 10th, 2024 meeting, moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Fast. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. That carries unanimously. Moving on to public comments, I'll look to the corporate officer for any public comments this afternoon.
There are no public comments.
No public comments. Looking at 3.1, our delegations this afternoon, we have a delegation from Green Line Ferries regarding an update to council proposal for electric passenger ferry in Howe Sound. We have Callum Campbell and his associate joining us. If you folks want to join us here at the speakers table, it would be much appreciated.
Thank you very much for having us again. It's been a while since we've been here. It's great to see all of you. I feel like last time I was here, it was icy cold winter. This is a different scene on Bowen altogether, so it's good. We're here today to provide an update on the ferry initiative, so the all-electric passenger-only ferry initiative for Bowen Island. We've had a fair bit of progress since I was here last. I brought my colleague here, Darren Pereira, Captain Darren Pereira, and he'll provide me his introduction in a sec as well. We've got a deck, so be it. Do that relatively quickly. So obviously, today the purpose is mainly just an update, but obviously we're ready to take questions and comments. They're in the state of affairs as they are today. So that's great. You can go to the next slide if you like. So just to recap, Green Line, we're looking to set up passenger ferries from Gibson to downtown Vancouver and from Bowen Island to downtown Vancouver. So we're looking to skip the car infrastructure altogether. So this isn't the service to Horseshoe Bay. It's directly to downtown. And we're looking to do this right off the bat, day one, zero emission vessels. Next slide. So our organizational capacity, we've met many of you before in person. There's also some others on who have joined Greenline, and maybe I'll just hand it over to Darren.
Sure.
So
Yeah. Nice to meet every one of you. My name is Darren. My background is in the marine industry. I live in New Westminster. I joined the BCID cadets in 2008. Went to the Great Lakes, worked on cargo freighters over there, and gained most of my sea time. Worked as an officer and then moved to the coast with BC Ferries and worked in Swanston, Horseshoe Bay, and Langdale. And recently, my last position was senior master on the Queen of Capilano. Resigned as of May 17th and joined Greenline Ferries as COO. I also work as a flag state inspector on freighters in the Port of Vancouver for Panama and Liberia.
Darren's adding a huge amount of capacity to Greenline and what we're going to do here. And so, both with his experience on, a range of vessels and including, waters of the Howe Sound, right?
Yeah.
This is what's called local knowledge.
Yes.
Darren's got it. So, thrilled to have him on board. Just another couple of faces on the screen there. There's Nick French. He's based in Victoria. He's a CPA. So he is Greenline's chief financial officer who's doing all the financial work. We've got a nice update on the financial side as well. And then, of course, Laura in the lower left-hand corner, she's our Indigenous Relations Advisor, and she is she's formerly with the Squamish Nation. She worked as staff there in the communication department. So we've got some great people to take this across the line here. Next slide. So just an update on the open house. That was over a year ago now. We had some of the engagement. I mean, we done some pop-ups. We had an open house, very well attended. Gibson's reasonably well attended here on Bowen as well. And then, of course, a survey. And I'll present some of the findings of that survey. We had 1,300 responses to our ferry service survey with some very pointed questions about how Greenline's ferry service should be shaped for this community. So the response I'm going to be presenting in the next few slides are only particular to Bowen Island, of which I think there were about 340 responses specific to Bowen. Next slide. Right. So of those 340 responses, how do you rate your current travel options to Bowen Island? Generally people are quite dissatisfied, right? So over half the folks are dissatisfied with their current travel options to Bowen Island. So that's something that we'd like to help with. Slide. Next question is, what are your main concerns with travel options to Bowen Island currently? And so 75% and you could choose as many responses as you want. So 75% of the people chose unreliable ferry service due to cancellations and delays. Not enough ferry sailings. Those are sort of common themes across many types of ferry services. Requires a car to get places. That was specific to Bowen. That ranked quite highly. Long travel time. I assume that means into Vancouver. So that's 36%. The people said it was long travel time. 40% of the people said it was high cost. 30% said limited travel options. And there were some other comments as well. So I think that tells us a few things about, how we might shape Greenline ferry service for this particular community. Reliability, additional capacity. Those are some of the key things that we know we need to address, and making sure that there's car-free options available. Slide. So, do you agree that a fast passenger-only ferry would improve coastal travel on Bowen Island? 95% agree or strongly agree. It's a strong. we expect that response to be yes, but that's a very strong response. What features of a passenger-only ferry service are important to you? Regular and punctual sailings. So that goes to the reliability aspect. Affordable pricing was 72%. Connection to a major travel transit hub. That speaks to what we need to do for Vancouver and making sure we connect in the right place in Vancouver. 55% agreed it was electric powered was important to them, and a short travel time. 42% valued a short travel So that's where we're at on the findings, and now I'll sort of tell you how we're shaping that up specific to Bowen Island. This is the vessel design that we're looking at. This is a vessel design we've had specifically done for Greenline by a world-leading naval architecture company called BMT. So I think last time I was here, I presented a vessel called Medstrom. It's a Norwegian vessel. So this is using all the same components of that vessel, the same batteries, so the same Corvus batteries, the same motors, reconfigured and packaged that is specific to Howe Sound. So specific for the seas, the winds, and the debris that we find in Howe Sound. So this is it's very similar in size and speed to the other vessel that I've shown you. We also have a very competitively priced shipyard quote on this vessel right now, built in Singapore. Here's what charging can look like. So we're looking at relatively simple terminal and charging facilities. So it's a long gangway from shore to a platform with is probably enclosed 3 sides at the very least. But our goal is to not have waiting latches. We don't want people waiting. We want people going. And the nice thing about a charging ferry is the ferry usually it does need some time to charge when it comes to Bowen. So when people arrive at the ferry, they'll be able to board the ferry right away. They don't need to go to another lounge and wait for that ferry to arrive before they board. They'll be able to board that ferry right away. And maybe you can just go back 1 second. I'll talk about charging. I thought I had another slide there as well. So we're charging, and this is a relatively new initiative that we are proceeding with Gibson's right now. With charging, we're looking to do the least amount of disruption to shore as possible. So we don't want to connect, we don't want to cause problems with BC Hydro, meaning taking great big peak loads at certain times and no charge other times. We're looking at something called the charge barge. It's essentially a barge that you build off-site, a steel barge, you pack it full of batteries, and then you bring it on-site on piles. And what that means is then you plug it into the BC Hydro grid. It trickle charges those batteries all the time, 24/7, at a much lower rating, so that when you bring the vessel in, you transfer that charge from the barge to the vessel without causing a peak load in BC Hydro. That's what we can do to sort of minimize substation upgrades and infrastructure upgrades onshore. So that was a finding that came from our study, our feasibility study with BC Hydro. That was a first study that we've done, and we are just scoping up. We're in the final stages of scoping up a second engineering study on that charge barge. It will be specific to Gibson's, that charge barge, so looking at their particular concerns. That's obviously a precedent that we would like to reuse for Bowen as well. So, we've been engaging with, all the ways that we can with your community and trying to understand the transportation issues and some of the broader issues as well. So we've provided some of our ridership data to the Transportation Committee. I think specifically probably around white sails and the park. We've contributed to the Bowen Island Tourism Master Plan. We've connected several times with Metro Vancouver on the Cape Roger Cutters Park and with staff in Metro Vancouver. We participated in BC Ferries, their Charting the Course Visioning Tour, right? Also, where they specifically talk about passenger ferries and wondering how they can fit into the mix as well. External validation. So as I said, we're just going through our second round with BC Hydro right now. So a second round of design engineering funding. Chamber of Shipping in Vancouver, very supportive of our work. Town of Gibson's, we've launched a green shipping corridor application with them that would have co-ownership, or I should say that would co-fund the charge barge. That's potential that we're looking at. And that would include the Harbor Landing Authority. And Darren and I were just in Squamish on Friday. So this was Squamish isn't Howe Sound. It's not one of our first runs, but we were sort of warmly welcomed by the district of Squamish, trying to understand how passenger ferries can fit, how all electric passenger ferries can fit for them. And then of course there's Hello, right? The proof is in the pudding. This is a brand new ferry service that is found very firm footing from Vancouver to Nanaimo. That is a diesel ferry service, but their ridership numbers are very strong, and they're off to a very strong start. So on our ridership side from Bowen, we've confirmed approximately 300 passengers a day to from Bowen. So that would be flows in both directions. So that would be inbound, that'd be commuters. When I say inbound, we're looking at home porting the vessel in Vancouver. We would love to consider home porting the vessel on Bowen. That does make more sense. But of course, there's a crewing issue. We need to make sure that all those crew can find housing on Bowen for that to happen. So it's a mixture of commuters and visitors. And our goal is, of course, to connect the vessel to downtown Vancouver in a place that is within close proximity to the Canada Line. I'll say that is one of our, well, we'll get into the funding and then I'll tell you what our major concern is. So next slide. So I'm also really happy to report that we're about 80% the way through the fundraise that we need to make this happen. So we are looking at a firm in London, UK. They traditionally buy aircraft and they lease them to regional airlines.
Uh-oh, Islands Trust.
Good thing it's right. So this would be a firm that would essentially purchase the vessels and then lease them, provide a finance lease to Greenline. So that provides a huge capacity for us to actually get this going. And the other major component to that is the Clean Technology Investment Tax Credit that is currently going through Parliament right now. That should be done before the House finishes sitting in 2 weeks' time. They've just gone through third reading in the Senate. This is essentially a 30% rebate on zero emission watercraft. So in the same way that they've had these programs to rebate people who buy EVs, this is essentially a 30% rebate for zero emission watercraft. So yes, there's a delta. These types of services are more expensive, but there is means to pay for this. So that is a key piece for us to actually fund this and make this happen. So between those two sources, we are about 80% of the funding to make this happen. So the update for you, in addition to kind of like, listening to the community, kind of consolidating that is that our preferred site for this service is Seymour Bay. And the reason for that is there's several. One is that it provides a secondary point of access for the island. So just in terms of an emergency response point of view, it fits within a bigger picture if we can talk about a secondary point of access for the community. Also, the Cove is congested. It is very congested, both with marine traffic right now and with cars right now. We also, we've got really strong alignment with Bowen Island Properties, both with where they're at right now and what they're trying to do. And we dovetail very nicely into the type of community that they're looking to develop there. So it's that's and the update is that's where we'd like to put our resource is into developing this opportunity for Seymour Bay and Seymour Landing, because that's frankly we see we can probably hit more of those points that people were looking for in a ferry service. We can probably hit greater ridership if that's our point of access. And we can grow alongside, as those plans come together, both in the short term and the longer term. In the short term, it's better circulation, whether that be kiss and go, whether that be some parking. We feel that there's better opportunities there. Yep, sure. Go ahead. Thanks. So that's Darren and I, working hand in hand full time to make this happen. I would say, with the design on the vessel side, with the design on the charge barge side, with the financing that we've made some good strides on. Our single biggest problems at this point would be sites. Securing what specifically are the sites. And that includes Vancouver. So we have had conversations with TransLink. TransLink is obviously the Seabus terminal is the ideal place. That's where previous passenger ferry services can go. TransLink is unable to offer us that site at this time. They have some issues with anyone providing access to that site for anybody right now.
So we are in 3 other conversations right now. I'm not going to name those other parties, but suffice to say they are all within the close proximity to the Canada line. So those CBus isn't the only site. There are some other sites as well. So we're fairly confident we will land a site in Vancouver. And with that site in Vancouver, that provides us with a lot of confidence that we can pull this off and deliver. So, that's the update. It's both to tell you where we're at and how far we've come, and to talk about Seymour Bay and Seymour Land, see how that fits, and how you might see that fitting into your community.
Thank you. I'd like to counsel for questions. I see Councillor Wade followed by Councillor Morris.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, and that's an encouraging update. I'm curious about both the charging and the docking in Seymour Bay. Is it possible that the charge barge could be anchored with a walkway ashore, and that charge barge could be both the dock and the charging station?
Absolutely, it's one and the same. So we didn't invent this idea. So this is in San Francisco. They've got a whole network of passenger ferries in San Francisco across the Bay Area. So they have a mandate to electrify all of those ferries, and their strategy is exactly that: build these standalone barges that become the platform where people wait. Right. So the batteries are underneath. Either the batteries are in the barge or they're in a container on board. Right. So that it becomes one and the same. So it makes it. It's a lot of benefits. I mean, it's scalable, it's modular, it's the same type of thing for every site. And you end up kind of minimizing the work you have to do at the sites that you're trying to access.
And in terms of, is there a fast charge option from the barge?
Yeah, for sure. So it's a manual charge. So we're not looking at an automated charging system. So with the big car ferry, for example, you sort of need a big robotic system. That's very expensive. We're looking at a manual charge. It carries a lot more power than a Tesla cord. So you can get these cords up to about 4.5 megawatts. So it's sort of like charging 25 Teslas at once. So yes, absolutely, it's a very high charge between the batteries and the vessel.
And it's when you say it's an actual physical cord that you have to plug in.
That's right. Yeah, it's a little bit bigger than a CCS2, but and we wouldn't need as much as that power that I just mentioned. But we'd need about 2.1 megawatts.
Right. Thank you.
No problem.
Councillor Morris.
So back to the passenger number, you said 380.
Yeah,
Is that just for the Bowen run?
that's just for the Bowen run.
And is that the actual, like a passenger that gets on in Bowen in the morning and comes home from Vancouver in the afternoon? Is that 2 passengers or 1?
That would be 2 passengers.
So you're really only going to carry 190 people.
Yeah, because that's both ways, right? So that's not, and of the 190, that they're not all from Bowen, right? Some are coming from Vancouver
But
doing.
190 coming from Vancouver and 190 going the other way.
Correct.
And the ferry holds 150.
Correct. Yeah.
So how many trips are you planning?
We're looking at 3, and I would say those are average numbers, so average for the year, and that's where we were planning to start. The ferry carries about 150 people, and we'd be doing 3 round trips a day. So the total capacity would be about 450 each way.
Okay, so 900 and you're only going to have 380
Correct.
riders.
Correct. And then, of course, in summertime, then there's a strong difference between a February and an August.
And then what about redundancy? Because one of the big issues was reliability. So
Mhm.
this boat would just service the Bowen run, or would it also service Gibson's? Because I know your original plan was Gibson's to Bowen to Vancouver.
Yeah, no, we've actually always planned direct runs. So we've always had, because we're looking to shorten the travel time. We don't want stops along the way. Having said that, we are looking at doing cross runs with the vessel. So the vessel that's homeboard in Vancouver will do several runs to Bowen. It'll also do 1 run to Gibson's in the course of the day. So we will have 2 vessels. We will have a 1 vessel schedule that serves everything. Of course, it'll be a reduced schedule. But for unplanned maintenance events or planned maintenance events, for example, in February, when the vessels need to go in for servicing, we will continue to provide service.
Okay, I think that was. And I'm suspecting the issue with TransLink is the fact that it's a fair paid zone that you're landing into if you go into that area.
My understanding is the commercial real estate issue with an upland partner.
Thanks. And good luck.
Councilor Biddy?
Came up with the last transportation committee meeting, that we needed an update, so that's. It's very exciting news, so the details will come later, but yeah, glad you're doing well.
Good.
Yep.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. It is definitely exciting. One technical question. I'm curious about the voltage requirement for the charge barge.
Mhm.
And the other question is, do you have a timeline as to when you may be making a final investment decision?
So we'd love to put our shipyard orders in this fall. So September, October, we'd love to have those shipyard orders in. We would build for 16 months, have those vessels delivered sort of early 2026 for service for summer 2026. That's the rough timeline. For the charge barge, that's exactly the study that we're doing with BC Hydro right now with Gibson's. So the goal is minimize all the uplands, idle work. So, I mean, the difference, if we charge the vessel at 2.1 megawatts, for example, I mean, how much do we need to charge the charge barge? Like a quarter of that, for example, because you're trickle charging. So it'd be like several homes worth of power, for example.
Can I ask my
Yeah.
follow-up question? So are you gonna charge the vessel while it's loading and unloading, or unloading and loading people?
Yeah.
So that's what, a half hour time frame, or are you gonna have?
Yeah, so that's exactly it. Unlike a diesel vessel, for example, where you try and minimize the dwell time, right? Get people on and off as quickly as possible. With an electric ferry, you do, sometimes it'll be 20 minutes, sometimes midday, it might be 90 minutes, right? Midday, for example, you might charge for a long period of time. So,
That, my second question was gonna be, well, if it's just gonna home port overnight in Vancouver, can you charge it up enough for the whole day's runs? But it sounds like you need charging at the other end.
we need charging every site, every run.
Unfortunately, the power hasn't been run all the way down into the Seymour Bay dock area, so there's no proper permanent power in there yet.
Yeah.
So as the development goes forward, there's no disruption.
Yeah, and I think that's, we're talking with Darren and, Rhode Island Properties are about the state of that power and what their plans are and how we integrate, right? I think they see Green Line as an asset and, we see them as an asset.
So given the timeline of looking to put in an order in the fall, with the selection of Seymour Landing as a site, what do you anticipate the request of the municipality will be as this process unfolds?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, that's our discussion with Rhode Island Properties, I think. So, yeah. And I think it's a bit of a two-way street as well. I mean, I think, this is a type of development that probably doesn't come in front of you all the time. So the question is, what do we need to see for this type of thing? And I think, and I think as much as possible, the charge barge idea came up specifically to fit within Gibson's, right? How do we make it easy, right, to fit within an existing community? So that's the type of thinking that we're trying to do. How do we make it easy to see compliance, right? Yes, this fits within our vision, our mission for this area. So it's not a specific answer, but that's probably something we'll have to come back to you with discussions from Rhode Island Properties.
Okay, just a second, Councilor Morris, and then Gibson's is an interesting comparison when we look at the BC Ferries infrastructure that's on Gibson's, who has a ferry landing that's sort of outside of the town center and has taken on lanes and lots and marshalling and all of that versus Bowen Island. And a lot of our congestion, I think, can be traced back to the lack of BC Ferries infrastructure here. And particularly when we look at just in these past weekends, lots of foot passengers who have been getting off the ferries and challenges with dispersal of that, both foot and vehicle traffic. You know, I think the concern that I would bring up from the municipal standpoint would be that we'd like to see some forethought on that, so that when passengers are disembarking from Seymour Landing, given that it is a new site, that there's the forethought given that about dispersal. Because right now there is no public transit that runs down there. So it would be vehicle access mostly on this site, and it would also be disconnected from our existing town center. So I'd be very curious to see and excited to see the plans that come forward from Bowen Island Properties as well as from Green Line to see you know, how we can start mitigating some of that congestion that we have in the Cove in a thoughtful and constructive way on that side of the island.
Can I ask, to what extent would the transportation committee be an asset to us in doing that type of work and doing that type of study, for example? I mean, it's an awfully large, I'm just trying to figure out like the right way instead of, you know, we could go away and present something, for example, but if it doesn't fit, we sort of need that input. I wonder if, is this a two-way street? Do we do this together?
I think there'd be a couple of partners to bring on board, right? So, you know, one of the big partners to bring online would be TransLink, particularly given that we're talking about foot passenger service. You know, having a foot passenger service that doesn't connect to public transit doesn't make a lot of sense, because it would be like we would have things reversed. We'd still have the main car marine link coming to the island, which is connected to TransLink, and people can get on a bus and go to various parts of the island in a place where we don't have enough parking down on the Cove. And on the other side, to have a vehicle-oriented piece of infrastructure that isn't connected to public transit and doesn't allow foot passengers to enjoy whatever's happening at Seymour Landing, as well as be able to get to other points of access in the island. I think it's going to be an important conversation to have. Whether that's, you know, I think there's the engagement that Green Line did on the island so far has been excellent. So, you know, there's no shortage of members in this community who will be thrilled to provide their opinions and thoughts on projects. So I would, you know, encourage either a direct to community engagement as to what they would like to see. The Transportation Advisory Committee can also be plugged in, as well as keeping council and myself updated, so that when I'm having conversations at TransLink and with the Mayor's Council as they look to unfold their next investment plans, that we can really be highlighting this type of project and infrastructure moving forward. Councillor Morris had a hand up, and then Councillor Fast.
Two things. I meant to mention my first round, TransLink was missing from your list of people you were consulting with, and really think you should. My understanding is they look at potential growth areas, and there's some people that have been pushing for transit service down to Seymour Bay for a number of years, but the biggest issue is there's not enough critical mass, not enough potential ridership. So this would add potential ridership. And then the passenger ferry to downtown Vancouver is already in our OCP. So that's not a hurdle that you have to go over. And,
Yeah, thank you.
Seymour Bay.
Yeah, so yeah,
And
that's,
then my third question is the water lot lease for the dock.
so, and I think that's, once again, where we'd be relying on our landside partner, Bowen Island Properties, to kind of help us negotiate that piece to it. I totally agree with you. TransLink is unfortunately missing from our list. Our conversation with TransLink, we've had some great conversations, but they've also stalled. This is, I think TransLink has lots of initiatives on the go right now, and this is not a priority for them, the best we can tell. We'd love it if it worked. So, you know, to that extent, you know, I do feel like there could be a role here for, you know, for the community to speak as well.
Thank you. And Councillor Fast, last question.
Yeah, thank you. I was down at Seymour Bay yesterday with a nature club outing, looking at sea creatures on the beach with families and folks from Bowen Island. So my question is, I'm assuming, but I don't know if this is true, that the electric ferry and the charge barge, that this operation will be less impact or more impact to marine life and environmental impact?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's all kinds of people invested in that question right now. Vancouver just introduced its first all electric tugboats, harbor tugs. And specifically, there's all kinds of interest in how does this help and support marine life. So Greenlands, we've done our own work with some local universities on that and what is the impact of all electric ferries. For sure, it's a different noise signature, but it is a much improved noise signature in terms of underwater radiated noise for one. And there's no indication that there is additional impacts as a result. So, I mean, generally, I think what we'd love to see, I'd love to have a number, right? I'd love to quantitatively tell you, here's what a Greenland ferry service, the noise profile would be compared to a conventional ferry service. And I think that's not a matter of time. But the ferries are, I think I told you, I rode the Norwegian ferry. And it's incredible. You hear the noise of the water against the hull. That's what you hear while it's underway, right? It's totally silent. It's a different experience.
There's also the fact that because it's electric, there's no fuel. There's no fuel leaks.
That's what I was thinking of as well. Just marinas just tend to decline over time. And thank you. Okay, great. And then my next question, or just I agree about TransLink and the idea of using trans to get foot passengers to a foot passenger ferry seems like a good one for me. I'm wondering does Gibson's, I don't think they're TransLink, but what arrangement do they have for buses? Does it come through the regional district or is it through the town of Gibson's or?
Yeah, so I think that's a piece that the town of Gibson is really sort of taking on. Initially we looked at some green municipal funding applications that we could sort of look at together. And I think Gibson's is taking that on themselves, right? It's like, how do we handle kiss and ride, for example, right? How do we fund parking within existing taxpaying infrastructure, for example? And so we've done the same. The ridership we project from Gibson's is higher than Bowen, and so there is more need there's going to be greater flow through for sure. But that's a piece of Gibson's.
Okay, I guess my question is specifically to the buses. Is it Gibson's buses or is it?
It's BC Transit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to confirm that.
Yeah.
Okay. And my last question is just about bikes. I see you've got 20 bikes on here. Is that flexible? Because I understand electric bikes are kind of a game changer, and I can see that for all kinds of reasons, people are taking them up.
Yeah.
And that's BC. That's TransLink calls it a game changer. And I'm wondering, when you consult with the municipality, we've got a cross island multi-use path coming across. So far, it stops kind of up there with above Tunstall Bay. Where will it extend to later? This is part of our island-wide transportation thinking that we need to have. And from that main multi-use pathway, we're anticipating, various trails and pedestrian and cycle routes, active transportation route, what's it called? Network, attaching to that. So it would be good to have your input early, and perhaps we can refer this presentation to the Official Community Plan Steering Committee, so that everybody's aware for the next bunch of planning. How could it all work together? A passenger ferry is wonderful, so let's get cars out of it.
Yeah.
As you said earlier, skip the cars.
Yeah.
And I think the same could be said for Bowen. We don't really want more people bringing cars to Bowen. So as much active transportation as we can get, or electric ferries or taxis or whatever options. So I hope you do find a way to engage with our transportation committee. But that was will the bikes will it be flexible? Would you be able to expand that in the future if needed? How much flexibility do you have
Yeah.
On the boat that you're
Yeah.
planning to order.
Yeah, it's essentially deck space. So deck space is provided for 20 bikes and
So
then
they'll be outdoors.
outdoors, yeah. And actually, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, one of the ferry services that we modeled very quick or watching very closely is a ferry service for Auckland, New Zealand. And in their case, they are actually enclosing the bike space because especially when you have an e-bike, you don't necessarily want it
Salt
mixing
spray.
with the salt
Yeah.
in the salt spray, right? So I think there's definitely something that maybe we need to consider there. The ferry service that we're modeling after is Kitsap Fast Ferry Service, which is just down in Seattle. And if you haven't been down there, it's a great, it's the look and feel, in terms of its point to pointness and its directness, right? How people load their bikes is one of those racks where you spend all of 5 seconds, securing your bike and then you're sitting in the ferry. That's what we're looking to do.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much for taking the time to come out to sunny Bowen Island today.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And moving on to the consent agenda, I'll look to council for any items that they would like to remove from the consent agenda. Councilor Getty. 4.2. Any other items from councilors? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to adopt the consent agenda, moved by Councilor Getty, seconded by Councilor Wake. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. That carries. And now 4.2, the award of tender for Fire Hall Solar Photovoltaic System. Over to you, Councilor Getty.
Is this new money? I thought that we had discussed having some sort of electric panels on the roof, but it was a future wish list kind of thing. So I'm a little bit surprised that it's on the consent agenda. I'm not sure that there's been any discussion about this. I don't know if it's come up at your infrastructure or capital spending, but if it's new money, then I have concerns.
It's in the,
Both with respect to what's happening with the old general store, and we don't know what that's. And we haven't completed the community center, and I mean, I think this is really important, and I think that we should have this, but I'm not sure that it's a priority, and I'm not sure that we've discussed it in detail at the strategic planning.
I'll look to staff.
it's in the approved 2024 budget. That's when it got approved. We had several meetings with council about the budget.
Yeah.
And it's lower than the anticipated budget projection.
CFO has a comment. Maybe I'll ask you to join us up here.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I also just wanted to point out that it is one of the ways that we are utilizing the climate action funding that we have. So it's a green construction measure that is a way to improve energy efficiency on buildings and meets the criteria for that grant fund.
Councilor Fest.
Thanks, and I have a question about the, those grant funds are only allowed to be used for certain things, is that true, correct?
It's a very wide scope of things, but this is one project that meets eligible criteria, yes.
Great, thank you, because I just wanted to say I'm in support of this. I love the idea of the fire hall going to net zero. It's been in conversation for a long time. This is part of an approach to sustainability. Before any approach, it's old, but anyway, exemplify, enable, engage, and encourage. And this is a way for, with the fire department being involved, then the practicalities of working with this kind of technology gets out there into the community. And the municipality gets to exemplify what it means to not only be net zero and all that means for climate action, but also to save the dollars once it's past its 12 years, up to the 30 years, and the what it could mean for in an emergency situation where we have a week of power outages or whatever, it means at least that the emergency services can function to a degree. I don't think it can, I don't know if it runs the fuel pump and all that kind of thing, but the point is also I like that it was safe, this particular tender. So anyway, for people to work with the way that the inverter worked. Anyway, I'm in support. So I'd be happy to move the motion.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, if we can keep a motion on the table.
Okay, I move that council award tender Firehall solar photovoltaics PV system to TerraTech Energy Solutions, Inc. for an amount not to exceed $68,740.45 excluding GST. Second.
Second by Councillor Morse. Any further discussion or debate? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And moving on to item 7.1, the West Side Water System metered rates for 2024. We have our CFO here as well. Any comments on this one or just here?
No, just here for questions. Oh, actually, there's a comment. Thank you through there to the rest of council. This is the second part of the transition to full metered rate billing for those 3 West Side districts. The 3 West Side districts are now the rate structure mirrors that has been in place in Tunstall Bay for several years now. Creates a lot of efficiencies for the billing. It is a more frequent billing period. It's going to be billed throughout the year. But the behind the scenes administrative process and work required to generate those bills is a much less degree. And from a staffing perspective, it's a much more efficient and easier method of billing. So we're very supportive staff end of moving to this billing structure, and it was also supported in all 3 of the local water areas. So
Any questions from council?
Did you want me to read the motion?
That would be great.
Whereas the phased implementation of new metered water rate bylaws was planned for 2024 for the Bowen Bay, King Edward Bay and Blue Water Park water systems. Therefore, be it resolved that Bowen Island Municipality Blue Water Park water system user rates bylaw number 638, 2024 be read a first, second, and third time. And be it further resolved that Bowen Island Municipality Bowen Bay water system user rates bylaw number 639, 2024 be read a first, second, and third time. And be it further resolved that Bowen Island Municipality King Edward Bay Water System User Rates Bylaw number 640, 2024 be read a first, second, and third time.
Moved by Councillor Morse, seconded by Councillor Getty. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
And that carries unanimously. Thank you.
thank you.
8.1 Union of BC Municipalities Conference Meeting Strategy, over to our CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. So in preparation for the 2024 UBCM convention, put together a recommendation of meeting requests for potential meetings with ministers and provincial staff. And we looked to last year's meetings and the topics that we discussed at last year's convention to inform this list. And so this is just an initial list for your consideration. Happy to make amendments to it, to delete or add. You'll note that there aren't any agencies identified at this time. And the staff listing there's only really 2 ministries with staff requests. We do have a lot more time to consider agencies and staff meetings. Those aren't due until, I believe, mid-August. However, the minister meeting requests are due June 21st, I believe it is. And so we do need to solidify that for our staff to submit the requests to the province.
Any discussion from council? Councillor Fast, you had your hand up. Before.
Okay, thank you. I like the list. I think it looks good. It'll be interesting to not have you with us this year because you're so familiar and they're so familiar with you. anyway, I'll be sorry to lose you, and I'll be missing you during UBCM. I'm wondering if we want to say anything about climate action. I didn't see that on the list there. If we want to, I don't think that might be not a minister meeting, though. I think that can happen through a letter or some kind of other meeting if we want to say anything specific. For example, about LNG development, how much of that fracking is the province going to support, and how much do we want to say from Bowen about having yet another vessel going back and forth, disturbing ferry traffic, cetaceans in Howe Sound, and potential for hazardous for emergency accidents, like is in our hazards and vulnerability assessment. But it occurs to me that, well, when does the provincial election happen?
Right after.
So the election is occurring, I believe it's the end of October. They haven't dropped the writ, they probably won't drop the writ until after the UBCM convention.
Right.
So they'll still be in they won't be fully in caretaker mode, as they call it.
Right.
So the ministers will still have their full authority. However, it's unlikely that they'll be willing or really able to make much in the way of decisions. They generally don't make many decisions at UBCM
No.
anyway.
No, I get it. I just was thinking, wait, are we going to be dealing with a different government?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, thank you. The other idea is just this, in the past, we've had meetings with the forestry department and the ministers about the potential for logging. I don't know if that's necessary now with the reconciliation action that's happening around the Land Act and these other provincial, bringing the Declarations Act into reality, but just something that people might want to discuss. The idea of keeping Bowen as a sponge island as much as we can with that forest soaking up the rain. And the last thing I just add out on my list that I didn't see on this draft list was tourism and visitor management, and what might be available to help Bowen Island with this increasing challenge, and no funds to do anything with, or no kind of maybe with the coastal strategy will help with that. I don't know, but so far I haven't seen any kind of bigger plan that we can hitch to. I don't know. Anyway, it's something I hear from other islands as well. And so I'm not sure what anybody thinks about that. I don't think these are minister meeting things. They're just points I put down so I'm quite prepared to just leave them off to the side for a letter or something specific later. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Morris?
Couple of things. I have a nice little piece of paper sitting on the table at home, and I'm looking to see what the heck is that for, and I realized that was my notes for this. But I think some of it was more agency meetings than anything else. But why are we raising road renewal and improvement works with Minister Fleming since we don't have any provincial roads on the island?
Because there is a provincial program, I can't remember the name of the program, but it's for shoulder widening and road widening, and it's basically a pedestrian safety program that they have, and
So it fits in with the Cross Island multi-use.
exactly, and other potential road widenings that we might want to be considering for safety.
Okay, and there's other ministers that are not the full minister, but
Yeah.
sort of the secretary type minister. I'm wondering if, I think for some of these, if we shouldn't be also meeting with them because they're the specific, sometimes charged with some of these specific tasks. And then the other question had to do with, I have some recollection of the recent round of funding for the economic trusts that IT just got didn't get any specific funding. They funded specific and things within the iced tea area. So is iced tea really still valid?
My understanding it is, and I understand that iced tea itself did get a top up,
Big, okay.
a fairly significant top up, and
Well,
so.
I thought that was a top up, but I thought it was already earmarked for specific things. That's why I was asking. Should we raise the rural designation with Minister Kang as well?
We are limited to 3 topics,
Ah,
and so
okay.
if that would be a council priority over the other 3, then that's certainly.
And then under Katrina Conroy, you've got the police services agreement. Is that also not in the bailiwick of
What is Solicitor General, so Minister Barnworth should be on there as well.
okay. And hopefully, I noticed you've got the Canada Community Building Fund. Discussions are ongoing, but is there any progress at all? Or any hints as to what it's going to look like in the second iteration?
No hints, it is ongoing, the
Yeah.
negotiations are on.
Okay. All right, and then my other question was, because there is an upcoming election, the opposition has critics that have certain portfolios. Should we be meeting with them?
Oh, that's a very good question. I've never used or seen UBCM convention used to meet with the opposition critics. I don't know that there's any organization around that. So, I mean, that would be council's prerogative if they were to try to want to reach out and set something up. Just a quick clarifying note too on the ministers of state that are associated with specific ministries. We generally make the request to the ministry and then they would redirect to the minister of state if appropriate. And so, but as done in the past, when we draft the notes for the actual convention itself, we'll make sure that we identify any ministers of state and get everybody's right names and things like that on there.
And then the other was the coastal marine strategy has not been released yet.
Yeah.
And that is Minister's.
Environment.
Is that environment or no, that's
Oh, walrus.
walrus, yeah. So should we be putting a placeholder in there for a meeting with quality because of that? Water, air, land, yeah.
First leadership.
Yeah. We have no idea what's in it, but I'm sure there'll be things in there that might have some impact on us. I'm curious as to what it hasn't been. Okay, that was. Question.
Mayor Leonard.
Yep.
In terms of duplicating topics amongst ministers, I found that they end up redirecting you if you make a request of the same topic to multiple ministers, they'll take that request and redirect it to one or the other.
Okay, so for the police services agreement, which is the key one to get the approval of first then. Is it Farnsworth or?
Farnworth.
Yeah.
And so we can remove it from the Minister of Finance request. I'd be inclined to leave it there because still want to keep Minister of Finance.
Of our interest.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, what's the intention of the ask as well? There could be different angles that go to the Minister of Finance versus the Solicitor General.
Thinking the ask is a reiteration of what we asked for last year, because
Exactly.
it's changed.
Yeah. And then is it with the municipal affairs, so we have the 3 topics listed both to Minister Kang as well as staff meetings. Does it make sense to duplicate those across the minister and staff? I mean, are we less likely to get a minister meeting if we also have that included in
No.
staff?
And I don't, so previously the province for municipal affairs and the premier they accepted fewer requests from communities that are closer to Victoria. So, and that might be the reason why we may not get the Minister of Municipal Affairs.
I feel like we're due.
And we didn't get one last year.
No.
Yeah.
And she hasn't visited us.
Yeah.
Okay. And then with that municipal affairs meeting, so we've got infrastructure deficit and dedicated funding required for small municipalities. Do we have a specific ask for that, or would we be going with a specific ask? We've, and then as well as the water system requirements. Like last year, we made them aware of this stuff. I'm wondering if we have a specific, here's a exact thing that we're asking for, pushing for the rest of the term.
Well, what we'd have asked for in the past was, would there be a willingness to support a, call it a collective grant application for all our water systems rather than one-offs? And so, you know, we managed to get a few grants for the different water systems. So the idea being, well, could we come at it from a more strategic collective perspective rather than individuals? And they haven't, and I understand why they're not too keen on that, but so they haven't said, yes, they would be willing to entertain that. And they're generally not too keen on it because they would rather make their funding in a more piecemeal way so that they can stretch their funding out from there.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Councilor Wick, followed by Councilor Getty.
I was just thinking about transportation and transit. And I know we've got 3 things already in the transportation and infrastructure with Rob Fleming. But is that a TransLink? Like, is TransLink an agency? Are the agencies here? Okay. Okay.
Although TransLink will sometimes set up at conventions and maybe
In the trade show, aren't they?
there's no reason why council couldn't request a meeting with TransLink at any point in time.
Right. It doesn't have to be a UBCM.
That's right.
Councilor Getty.
I don't disagree with any of these requests to visit with the ministers and the topics. I think we need to have a strategy session so that we don't end up. Some of our, I think our debriefing last year, we need to reconsider in terms of how to approach some of these questions. But when I read through this booklet, in terms of all the different ministries and subcommittees, it's things that are important to Bowen are things like the transit infrastructure and forest tourism, seniors, family services, and the creative sector. And I see those all listed in the appointment book. So between now and August, when we have a deadline, I suppose between now and the end of July, before we take August off, trying to figure out whether or not we need to have meetings around some of those other topics. And I think with children and family services, for instance, we should be talking to the Children's Center and seeing if they've got any issues that they'd like us to bring up with the ministry, and the same possibly with seniors keeping young in terms of, or the accessibility committee in terms of issues that they think we should try to tackle, possibly tourism. But some of those other agencies in the community that we have partnerships with might have some ideas.
Councilor Fast.
Just on the accessibility front, we've got our committee is coming together to create the plan, which will outline what our needs are, and we won't have that probably done until September or or ready for council anyway until September.
I'm curious about the tourism piece and whether it's worthwhile meeting with that minister. Because I think the message generally that we get from, not our tourism folks, but from tourism in general is that tourism is great for municipalities and it should be pursued at all costs as a driver of economic development and community health. And I think in a lot of communities, that's probably true for those that have the ability to absorb it from an infrastructure standpoint. But I don't know if a lot of noise is being made by outlier communities like us who feel disproportionately affected by tourism, and given our small property tax base, don't have the funding to deal with like congestion in Snug Cove, and we aren't getting help from BC Ferries. And whether it makes sense to highlight that to the minister, that we could use some funding to offset the infrastructure costs of managing our tourism, but ultimately in service of making the island more livable for residents and the visitation experience better for people that come to visit the island. It's fast.
I thanks for that thinking, because I was thinking, how do we follow up from the last Howe Sound Forum where the minister came to the Howe Sound Forum at the invitation of the West Bend Mayor Sager to talk about the idea and have some engagement with the people around the table, with the elected folks around the table about the idea of a bike route to Squamish and that kind of thing. And I think it might be a good idea. I don't know what exactly she left with the minister from that meeting, but it might be good to fill her in on some of our challenges and that wouldn't necessarily help us. And we guess I better take a better look at our new tourism plan, but I like that idea of coming to present Bowen's point of view on tourism. Yeah.
Any further comments, discussion? Things that you'd like to hear from us, Liam?
I guess, well, want to take away from this clear direction on which meeting requests we're going to be going forward. So what I've been hearing is everybody seems to be okay with the list that's presented. And so perhaps an amendment to the recommendation is to add Minister Farnworth for the Police Services Act and the Police Services Agreement. And then I heard several ideas about other pieces, but I'm not sure if they're landing as a formal request.
I agree with Liam's take. I don't really think we're ready to talk to the minister about tourism yet. We don't have a specific ask. We don't have staff that deal with that specifically. We don't have we haven't done anything yet with that tourism plan. And yet others are, like our delegation here today was referring to it. So I think we have some work to do before we talk to the minister. Is maybe what I'm thinking. And I'd like to hear about the coastal marine strategy, if there are changes coming there. But I don't really have a specific ask for the minister at this point.
Could also be looked at for staff as well, I think.
It's an issue. Yeah.
Maybe because we don't know what the strategy says yet.
Well, if it says anything, even about tourism.
Oh, I.
So we heard the addition of Minister Farnworth.
Yep.
We leave it at that. The recommendation would read something like the council directs staff to request minister and provincial agency meetings at the annual Union of BC Municipalities Convention to discuss the topics identified in attachment 1 of the report with the addition of Minister Farnworth discussed at the June 10th meeting.
Don't we want to add the minister?
Sorry, say that again?
Minister for Waterland and Land Resource, whose name has totally escaped me,
Mr. Cullen?
Mr. Cullen. We can always withdraw the request but I'm guessing there's gonna be things in that coastal marine strategy we're gonna want to discuss. If we don't ask now, we won't be on the list.
So then with the addition of Minister Farnworth and Minister Cullen as discussed at the June 10th regular meeting of council. Is there a mover for that motion? Moved by Councilor Lake, seconded by Councilor Getty. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
And that carries unanimously. Moving on to 8.2, an update from our CAO.
Hey, thank you, Mayor. So a quick update on a few capital projects. The Carter Road Bridge project is being planned out and ready to initiate later this month. So it's pretty exciting. And there's been communication with the neighbors and about their strategy to minimize impacts, and that'll carry on that communication also further. And I don't have the exact date at hand, right? But the multi-use path is really still in the planning phases. And as for an update on the Cold Bay Drinking Water Treatment Plant, the technology provider Purifics is still assessing the treatment technology itself. As I understand it, there's a number of the ceramic membranes that were compromised, and I'm hoping for a more detailed update along with an estimated time of delivery. Hopefully I'll get that later today or tomorrow. You know, we're trying to get that nailed down because we want to schedule the commissioning and schedule the travel for their staff person to come out for that. And we have been meeting with the medical health officer from Vancouver Coastal Health about the timing of that as well, and their availability for that too. And so. And in terms of the community center, some good news. Last week was quite a productive week on site. Again, it often looks and feels like not much is happening outside, but inside there is a lot of work underway. And the most significant milestone that just passed is the building has been energized. So we hooked up BC Hydro, we got power inside, which is fantastic news because that enables us to start testing all of the alarm systems, all the life safety systems of the building sooner so that we can achieve commissioning more easily. And so the next big thing will be getting the heat pump up and running. So was put into position last week and it's connected to water, but it isn't fully operational yet. And so pretty soon they'll then have heat and cooling in the building. And so then that means all of the portable heating equipment pieces can be removed from the site, and we can also start testing the air handling system, the balancing of everything. And so that's really encouraging. So yeah. And that's it for.
From the roof, from the siding?
That carry that's continuing on. So there was another delay due to an insulation issue of some insulation needing to be modified to accommodate the metal roofing. And so that had to be double checked and communicated amongst the different professionals involved. And so that's just been green lit last week, and so they're carrying on with that now.
There's two on the side facing west, I guess. there's still two strips that are under tarp on the roof. Something to do with the skylight?
The tarp was mostly installed to protect from UV for the underlay for exposure, so it's not a waterproofness issue.
Well, but the whole roof is done from one end to the other except for two strips where there's still a blue tarp running down.
Oh, it's not blue tarp, that's the underlay. And yeah, so that's exactly it. So the detailing around the interface between some of the vertical pieces, so where there's overlaps or there's a technical term I'm forgetting right now.
Flashing.
The flashing, yeah, where the flashing interfaces with the roofing will be done at a later point, so.
Well, it doesn't look like there's skylights installed yet either.
No, there's skylights there.
Oh, well, they're blue. They're blue, they are. Okay. Well, I'll have another look. I'm just getting questions about what's going on with those two strips on the roof that don't have, from several people.
Yeah.
That's fast.
I rode on the ferry behind a BC Hydro truck that had the big winch on it and all these power things, and I thought, aha, they're coming to pull the cable or whatever that wording is, but that's great to hear that's electrified, thank you.
Seeing no further questions, we'll move on to correspondence 9.1. This arises out of the letter that we received a copy from Mayor White over in Gibson's, BC Ferries and some of the challenges that they're experiencing. I note that BC Ferries has been a hot topic of conversation in our community over the last few weeks. I think that as the summer season gets started and the schedule seems to drift in ways that almost doesn't feel like we're on a meaningful schedule anymore, and it's affecting residents. So this is a motion to send a letter, have the mayor send a letter on behalf of council to the same folks that Mayor White wrote, also in solidarity, as well as highlighting some of our unique challenges. Happy to discuss that unless someone would like to make the motion.
I'll make the motion.
Sure.
That the mayor send a letter on behalf of council to the chair of BC Ferries Board of Directors, highlighting Bowen Island's own community ferry challenges and supporting the position of the town of Gibson's in its letter dated May 30th, 2024. And to copy the letter to the BC Ferries Commissioner, the BC Ferry Authority, neighboring ferry communities, the Minister of Transportation, and local provincial elected officials.
Second that. Any discussion? Seeing none, Councilor
Well,
Morris.
just clarifying, neighboring communities.
Mhm.
How is that?
Folks, I mean, similar to what Mayor White did, I would send it to Gibson, Seashells, Squamish, possibly some of the folks that are in the Islands Trust as well, but I would take that at my discretion.
Not the whole, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I had a similar question is, could you copy Islands Trust Council, and then it goes to all the trustees. Also, I was gonna suggest that you CC it to Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities. It's not our area association currently, but that's all the communities on the Vancouver Island and Gibson's, and everybody's a very accessible community except for us. And Tsawwassen, I guess, or other bigger places, but.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, I can add those. And with that, I'll look to call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. And that carries unanimously.
So
Yep.
before we leave this various topic, everybody's aware of their meeting on June the 18th.
Yeah.
And I hope a lot of the public will show up, but you have to pre-register. And it's down at the library, so I'm not concerned about space.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm registered, but it also overlaps with our volunteer meeting.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can do anything about that. Volunteer appreciation.
Okay, we can take a look at it.
The trust.
Okay, moving on to item 11. So 11.1, we have a notice of motion from Councillor Wake, which is listed here. It will appear on the next agenda. Feel free to read it if you like, Councillor Wake.
Whereas BC housing funding has now been approved for the 24-unit Birch
Can I
Lookout.
ask a question before you read it?
Mhm.
Because I'm not sure why this clause is in here. Why would you have a clause? I'm in the third paragraph.
So we're just to be clear, we're not discussing the motion. So Councillor Wake brought the motion. The motion can
Okay,
be
so the
discussed.
notice of motion won't be, could be amended.
It can be amended when it's taken up for business at the next meeting.
Okay,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll raise my issue.
Whereas BC housing funding has now been approved for the 24-unit Birch Lookout project at 1033 Miller Road, and BC Housing requires Lookout to have land tenure for the site in order to proceed with the funding and development process. And a long-term lease from BIM to Lookout would provide the required land tenure, and an agreement to lease would provide initial assurance to Lookout and BC Housing. This could be followed up with a long-term lease later in 2024 and include a clause indicating that if ownership of the land is transferred, the lease would remain in effect. Therefore, be it resolved that council direct staff to prepare an agreement to lease the lands at 1033 Miller Road to Lookout Housing and Health Society for consideration by council at the July 8th, 2024 regular council meeting.
Okay, thank you. So we will, council will consider that at its next regular meeting. 11.2, update the council on Metro Vancouver business. There was a board meeting held on May 31st. A lengthy meeting that covered a number of topics. I was using an adjective to describe that meeting. I would call it spicy. It's worth a watch for folks that are interested in regional governance. There was very long discussion on the apportionment of the cost overruns of the North Shore wastewater treatment plant, and how that $2.8 billion should be spread across the region or not spread across the region. There was also discussion about some remuneration pieces. It appears that there's a what I would call a climate debate brewing at the board level about the implementation of Metro Vancouver's 2050 climate strategy, and the discussion this time around focused on the underlying building roadmap and the notion of regulating buildings for the sake of air quality in the region, which is a delegated authority from the province, as well as a notice of motion that was filed at the end of the meeting by myself and Mayor Johnstone around how board expenses are reported going forward. So it was a very lengthy meeting. Lots of debate, but it's clear that the politics at the regional level are not necessarily unified and shifting, and there's interesting things happening there that I think is worthwhile for the public to pay attention to. Yes.
Was the motion about spending resolved?
It'll be debated at the board meeting at the end of this month, so it was just noticed. TransLink was, the Mayor's Council was much less exciting, generally a continuation of putting pressure on the province generally, as well as ahead of the election, to highlight the service cuts that will result if TransLink's operating gap and fiscal cliff isn't resolved, as well as really questions as to where the federal government is and why the permanent transit fund hasn't been implemented yet. That's an ongoing conversation that's going on there. With that, I'll look to our Islands trustees for an update from the trust.
Just that next week, Islands Trust Council meets on Salt Spring Island. And so we'll head out directly after the committee of the whole in rustle of papers and running feet as we dash down to the ferry or I will anyway, to start heading over to Salt Spring. And we've got a day, the Wednesday in the middle will be more strategic planning. It's a challenging group of trustees to bring together into one strategic plan, and at the same, because views are very different. And then the other thing we're trying to do over there is create a new strategic planning process so that things are better aligned rather than each incoming trust council starting a new strategic plan. And trying to align the different parts of the different projects and have more consistency among official community plans, for example, and aligning it all. Anyway, so there's a whole bunch of planning going underway, including for the, I don't think we'll be discussing it at the quarterly meeting, but the trust policy statement amendment project is going on in the behind the scenes, not behind the scenes, sorry, that's the wrong word, but alongside through a number of committee of the whole meetings. And so that'll be interesting to see what happens there. And there's been good input received from a number of First Nations and Islands Trust Conservancy. I think we've got a letter, or at least once came recently, might be on the next agenda. Islands Trust Conservancy, which is one of the arms of the trust that Bowen participates in. Now they're up to 100 protected places. Whether that's a conservation covenant, like a legal agreement that runs with the land, or whether that's an actual nature preserve, they applied for a 2-year, 3-year interim conservation plan, because they have to do that every 5 years to the minister for approval. And meanwhile, all these changes around reconciliation had happened. Islands Trust Conservancy had signed a declaration of reconciliation as well with different goals. And the minister sent that back and said, no, you can't have an interim plan. Use the time to come up with a 5-year plan that does have the input from all of the nations, which I guess gives time to fund them. Fund all the engagement, because not all First Nations have staff to take on all the requests for referrals and things that come their way. And but at the end of her letter, she says, this is the Minister of Municipal Affairs, and she says to continue your good work, leading the way, because that it is really, they've done a lot already, and so this gives a chance, I think, for the land arrangements that have been initiated to get maybe caught up a little bit while this planning is underway for a new way of engaging with First Nations going forward about their territories. So interesting to watch. And but anybody's welcome to come or to tune in to Trust Council on Tuesday and Thursday next week. The Wednesday won't be, it's a workshop, facilitated workshop by consultants to do with the strategic planning side of things. So it'll be a working session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last June, on the 5th of June, 1974, the Islands Trust Act was proclaimed. It had just been passed the day before by a majority in the House. Been debated for about 2 months. It had been in the works for about 4 years, and it's quite remarkable when you think of the type of agency that it is. It's a federation of 400 and some odd very, very different islands, and from the beginning, there's been strong opposition to the limits that have been placed on development and land use planning. So that continues, and we're presently dealing with some very interesting disturbers and detractors and people that have been elected to the trust that are raising all sorts of questions, and we're getting into discussions about a code of conduct and I've been looking at recently a whole lot of stuff about boardroom problems and trying to figure out how to manage that better. So we were planning some sort of a celebration. We'd invited the minister and I gather there's going to be a cake, but the minister has declined and sent her regrets very recently in terms of not being able to make the meeting, which is very disappointing in terms of this is a remarkable institution that is rare. Maybe the islands in the Washington are the same, but are very similar, but it's remarkable that this government has created and has continued to support nominally, one might think, but still support the existence of something that has got a mandate of preserve and protect. And, we're getting into a situation where the whole world wants to have a mandate to preserve and protect. And we've done very well. So I think we're lucky to be a part of it. And it's not easy, but I think it's managed pretty well to hold on to some of those ideals. So the Conservancy is hugely successful and has amassed quite a portfolio of assets that are now to the benefit of the province and all of the people in the province. So while we muddle along and try to sort out how to behave civilly to each other and get some of these difficult issues decided, then we still exist and we still are protecting. So I think it's a good organization. I think there's lots to celebrate. So I'll have a piece of cake for all of you.
Awesome. Thank you. Any questions for the trustees?
Do you have any idea what Brian Gravel's presentation is going to be on? Say that again. Brian Gravel, the Minister of Transportation. Transport Canada.
The agenda's all up there, but I haven't looked into the
There's
details.
just nothing. It just says Brian Gravel, Transport Canada.
I expect that it may be about anchorages. There's a lot of different kinds of transport ships that have been anchored all through the Gulf Islands. It's sort of treated like a free parking zone. So you don't have to, you can wait there until your slot comes over in Port of Vancouver or in Nanaimo. And so they're all out there dragging their big chains across the bottom and leaving their lights on and their generators on all night and this kind of thing. It's a problem. And that may be one of the reasons. It's about Transport Canada's jurisdiction about that kind of thing. Maybe that's what it is.
And they've just set up a committee and they've been negotiating some sort of an agreement to limit the number of boats. So
I saw that.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to question period. I don't see anybody in the room or online period. With that, I will look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Wake. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Yeah, so we'll take a